On this episode of Cape Media News, coastal resiliency dollars coming to Cape Cod. We take an inside look at the opioid crisis, and author Casey Sherman talks about the finest hours. These stories and more, this is Cape Media News. The Coast Guard suspended its search Thursday for an 80-year-old man who failed to resurface from a dive near Provincetown's Long Point Wednesday morning. Response boat crews from Coast Guard Station Provincetown, helicopter crews from Coast Guard Air Station Cape Cod, and the crew of the Coast Guard cutter Hammerhead worked closely with multiple state and local responders. A crewman aboard a 16-foot Boston Whaler dive boat contacted Coast Guard watchstanders for help at 11:40 Wednesday morning, reporting the man began his dive at 11 a.m. and shortly after was no longer attached to his dive flag. At last contact, the diver reported he had 30 to 35 minutes remaining on his oxygen tank. He was diving in about 35 feet of water. He had more than 50 years of diving experience. Well, there's been an uptick in local shark activity this week. Twice, swimmers were ordered out of the water at Nauset Beach because of nearby great whites. Rebecca Maisel captured this video on Thursday at Nauset Beach. You can see researchers in the distance working to tag sharks. One of the region's most noted shark experts, Mass Division of Fisheries researcher Dr. Greg Skomel, was filming with a GoPro earlier this week when a shark got up close and personal with the camera lens. This particular shark, an 11-foot female. Researchers are hard at work tagging and tracking local white sharks in an effort to discover just why so many are appearing in local waters. Up next, a local author tells tales at Thurwood Place in Yarmouth.
You made your house a reality. Homeschooling yourself on loans, color-coding listings, and flushing every toilet in a 20-mile radius. If you can ace house hunting, you can do it for retirement. Get on track with tips at aceyourretirement.org.
Author Casey Sherman spoke at Thurwood Place in Yarmouth this week, telling residents about his journey writing The Finest Hours, a local hero story that turned into a Hollywood blockbuster. On display at Thurwood, a wooden model of the Coast Guard lifeboat that made the heroic rescue, lovingly created by Dr. Frank Hines.
The gentleman explained, yes, he said they have the prints for it, the blueprints, and it took them 8 years to develop them because they took the original blueprints of the 36-500, and they're available from the government because it's government property, and it took them that long to get the size down to proportion. And this particular model is a 1/4 inch to the foot.
But more impressive than the model, Dr. Hines says, is the memory it evokes.
It was in service until 1968 when it was taken out of service. And in that interim, in 1952, was when these 4 Coast Guardsmen went out and rescued the 33. 32 was actually what they brought back in on a boat that was built to hold 12 men, and it's actually the Coast Guard classifies them as a motor lifeboat. It's not a pleasure boat, and it's far from pleasurable to ride on this boat, I'm sure. And those 4 brave men, those young boys that went out, it had to be the worst experience in their life, and I'm sure they didn't realize what they were getting into when they went out there. But they persevered, and they brought back 32 men that were left on the stern of the Pendleton when it broke up in that 1952 storm.
And Sherman agrees about the importance of preserving our past.
It's living history again, and as I said, we all play a role in preserving these great stories, whether I'm writing a book or Dr. Hines is making this incredible model. I was shocked to learn that he'd never actually physically been on the boat before because it is so detailed and it looks exactly like it does when it's docked at Rock Harbor in Orleans. So I was very honored to get a chance to meet him, and he's incredibly knowledgeable and spirited.
Sherman's hour-long talk told the story of persistence in his initial phone calls with the book's hero, Bernard Weber, to spending almost 6 years trying to get the film produced. Now, Sherman is preparing for the release of his latest book, the story of another kind of hero.
I've got a project a book coming out in September called The Ice Bucket Challenge, which is about the young man who inspired the 2014 social media charity revolution to raise $220 million for ALS. Now, that's the story everybody knows, but the personal, gripping, compelling, heart-wrenching yet hopeful story of Pete Frates, the young man battling ALS, and his family is the story that nobody knows, and we cannot wait to share that with the world, because it's a story about love. It's a story about love of a family and love of humankind. When people do things together, amazing things can be accomplished.
Sherman spoke at Thurwood Place this Monday, August 7th. The Cape's largest energy supplier is asking for a rate increase. A public comment period on that request is open until the end of August. Local energy aggregator Cape Light Compact is concerned about the potential impact that rate hike would have on Cape Cod energy consumers.
We were very concerned when we reviewed and read the rate case filing about a couple of things. And they filed twice. They filed in January, and then they submitted a supplemental filing in June. And this is the first time since the 1980s that electric rates for Cape Cod residents have been reviewed by the Department of Public Utilities. It's a massive filing with lots of information, very technical and complicated.
The Cape Light Compact is concerned about the proposed cost shift.
Eversource is proposing to shift $30 million of costs associated with Western Mass Electric. So those are costs that from commercial and residential customers that have been incurred in the Wamiko territory, and some by commercial customers in eastern Massachusetts. And they're proposing to take that $30 million and bury them in residential electric rates. So that's a cost shifting and cross subsidization that we have asked the department to not approve.
And the compact is worried about rising costs for residents.
If you're a residential non-electric heat customer on the Cape, you'll see on your bill every month you get a $3.73 charge, and that's flat no matter how many kilowatt hours you use. So you can use 0 or 1,000, you'd still at least pay that $3.73. Eversource is proposing to more than double it to $8 every single month. And the effect of this is it reduces control over customer bills. We've had customers that are very aggressive about energy efficiency through our programs, and they've taken steps, they've even made investment to manage their bills over the long term. This rate case really upsets that by imposing a charge that they can't do anything about. As long as they're interconnected and taking service, whether it's 1 kilowatt hour or 10,000, they're going to pay an increased customer charge. And we don't think that's very fair to customers that have been very proactive about taking advantage of energy efficiency and have been wise about managing their usage.
Eversource maintains that these rate increases are necessary to cover costs of service to customers in Massachusetts. Again, the public comment period open through the end of the month. Up next, local efforts to combat climate change get a boost from the state. For Cape Codders, we know climate change is real and the state is paying attention too. This week, the Baker-Polito administration announced more than $2.2 million in funding to support local efforts to increase community preparedness and resilience.
Probably nowhere else in the Commonwealth but Cape Cod is the environment more important to the economy. Our economy is entirely based on our environment, protecting it, understanding it, and working within its limitations.
Massachusetts Energy and Environmental Affairs Secretary Matthew Beaton visited Cape Cod on a hot and sunny Wednesday morning to celebrate the grant recipients.
There's going to be 16 communities totaling $2.2 million that will receive grants for projects that go either towards an educational component around coastal resiliency and climate change, or working with towns in the planning process to work towards infrastructure improvements to make our coastline more resilient.
Projects like a resiliency effort on Dr. Botero Road and Chapin Beach in Dennis, one that will maintain access to the beach and to the Aquaculture Research Corporation, the site of Wednesday's announcement.
Our project, which you all saw on the way in on your slow drive, which is right up where you all slow down to see that beautiful vista of Cape Cod Bay, and then you have to take a sharp 90-degree turn. Where all those orange barrels are, that is our project. And we are trying to balance natural resource protection, coastal resiliency, and long-term public infrastructure by maintaining that road, which provides a vital access to ARC, as well as to one of our public beach parking lots.
$79,000 is going to an assessment of coastal change in Eastham.
It really isn't a grant program. It should be thought of as an investment program, because these monies are investing in all of and protecting and making sure all of the wonderful natural resources that we value here in the Cape and our economy, as John just said, are to be protected as the climate changes and sea level rises.
Falmouth is receiving funds for shoreline stabilization.
We know that we have one of the most incredible places on earth. This is why we waited in traffic, because we have these amazing beaches, and our biggest asset sometimes is our biggest challenge as well, because of the reality that what we're dealing with in regards to climate change, and what for those of us who are on the Cape, for those of us who are on the South Shore, we understand the impact that has on our coastal areas and the erosion issues that we have to deal with. And we need partners. We need partners in the public sector, we need partners in the private sector, we need partners in the municipal sector to deal with this issue, because sometimes it's just so much bigger than one small community can do.
And while local towns work hard to mitigate climate change, Secretary Beaton says partnership with the state, towns, and local businesses is the key to success.
Certainly, our Office of Coastal Zone Management, with Bruce Carlisle at the helm, works very closely with our municipalities. We have a number of other programs that we are working on a regular basis with municipalities, and for us, a very exciting time. We have a real new program called our Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, where we have a number of Cape Cod communities that have participated, and this is going to be a statewide initiative announced by Governor Baker last year that we are now underway with. We have 71 communities participating in the first year, where we're going to be working hand in hand with the communities to provide technical assistance, some technology to get them up to speed to identify some of the vulnerabilities that they have as the climate is changing, and help in preparing vulnerability plans, and that will help us influence future grant opportunities for these communities as they become MVP communities. So a lot of engagement and a lot of partnerships with the municipalities, and that's what it's going to take. We can't do it alone, the communities can't do it alone. It's going to take these partnerships of all of us working together.
And they didn't plan it, but Secretary Beaton and Senator Vinnie DiMacedo had something in common on Wednesday morning.
What do you think, huh?
Up next, we'll talk with local police about the ongoing opioid crisis. The impact of addiction on the Cape and Islands is anything but a hidden topic. Opiate addiction is a pervasive problem that affects so many here on the Cape and Islands. In an effort to better understand the issue, we spent time with police from the towns of Yarmouth and Barnstable in a new series we're calling Community Impact. This week, we ask our experts, is the problem getting worse?
Well, I think generally it's been pretty steady over the past 3 years. It's difficult to say because our data only is based on how many overdoses we respond to. Since Narcan has been introduced to not only policing, but to the general public, there are a lot of people that are getting Narcan and brought back and never get reported to us. So the numbers we can go by are only the ones that actually get reported to us. For example, even if they go to the hospital on their own, we don't necessarily get reported for what happened. So we can only go by what we actually respond to.
Yes, it's getting worse. It goes in waves. You'll get no overdoses for 2 weeks, and then you'll get 15, 20 in a 2-week span. And then before it would take one deliverance of Narcan to get them out of it, and now it's taking sometimes 2 or 3 before they come out of it. So the potencies of the drugs is substantially more than it was before, because they're mixing it with the fentanyl, and then now it's starting to be this the carfentanil, which is 1,000 times stronger than fentanyl, and fentanyl is 100 times stronger than heroin. So, and they're both cheaper than heroin.
I think there's a certain portion of the population that have a general idea of what's going on, and probably less of an idea of what we go through. I do think there's also a significant part of the population that doesn't know a whole lot about it at all. I mean, they know there's an opiate problem, and then that's about all that they're aware of. Kind of that it doesn't affect them, so they don't have all the information. We're very limited in what we can do. The new protective custody law that we have gives us a little bit more leverage to try and keep people safe. So if we respond to an overdose and Narcan is administered, we now have the leverage to tell the person, much like the PC law for someone who's intoxicated, if they've overdosed and we've administered Narcan, we can force them to go to the hospital even if they won't do it. But it's just a single small step. It's a step in the right direction, but we send them to the hospital and they're there an hour, long enough to give all their information, and they get their vital signs, and they're still fine, and they turn around and walk out the door because they won't accept any further help. And it's a catch-22, because it's that adage, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force them to drink. So we can force them to the water, to the hospital, but if they don't want to accept more help, there's not much more that we can do.
Hundreds of families visited Barnstable High School on a sunny Wednesday for the annual Kids Day, an event that brings police together with local children in order to foster a friendly environment. Kids were treated to a water park, games, food, and vehicles on display. They also got to see canine demonstrations and get to sink an officer in the dunk tank. Thank you for joining us for this week's edition of Cape Media News. You can follow us online at capemedia.org and visit our Facebook page, Cape Media News. I'm Sarah Colvin. See you next Friday.